there's a whole variety of things, so you don't have to start from scratch. The second one here is Mather Days. This is a free PD that I host every Saturday. If you like doing this task, you want to continue doing it to, continue your work on rich tests, you're welcome to come. There's recordings of lots of problems, even one from the Virginia Department of Education, and we're going to be doing that one today. So I hope to see you there also. And then if you join me on slide 3 or 4, I'd love to hear from you all. How are things going? What are the successes and celebrations in your lives? You can do this by inserting a text box, but you could also do things like add photos, animated GIFs. You can add Bitmojis. You can add hearts, stars. You can comment on other people's. That is all up to you. And if you are trying to figure out how to make a text box, you're going to go up to your toolbar and look for this little T with a box around it. We've put a picture underneath the word successes. Wow, who has managed to lose weight over COVID? What's your trick? I am so curious. I'm going to invite several of you all to turn on your microphone, share and elaborate a little bit more. It's an invitation. We'd love to hear more from you. So if that was you, what tips do you have?
I think my mic is on. I've just turned 50, so I decided to try intermittent fasting, and it's actually working. So I just stopped. Basically, I stopped eating at 8, and then at 8 p.m. and I just was eating too much, out of stress, and so it's just helped. I've lost weight, and it's been going good. Just stay away from the kitchen though when you're teaching. You have to stay away.
Well, congrats and thanks for sharing with us. Somebody mentioned that they have better attendance and engagement. I'd love to hear a little bit more. What tips do you have for other teachers?
Hi, that was me. So granted, I did have very low expectations. As I mentioned, I was worried about that over the summer just because the spring didn't go so well. But I've just really, all the new technology, I was getting intimidated by it. So I just have been using Pear Deck, and it's just gone, inserting questions every so often, and it's worked out pretty well. And the kids are actually pretty chatty in the chat boxes. I think since they're texting all the time, it seems to be like a comfortable means of communicating for them. So like I said, I had low expectations, but I've been pleasantly surprised by all that.
Yay, I'm so glad you shared your success with us. Thank you. And who is the pre-calc teacher working on the 2020 election? I can't wait to hear what these kids, are they 18 yet? Are any of them voting? How did it go?
Hi, I'm Liz Keller. I'm the pre-calc student. Teacher, sorry, I'm tired. So it's a project that my coworker and I worked on together, and we went to Ballotpedia and found all of these we picked 5 different categories. It's immigration and gun control and minimum wage and coronavirus and the economy. And I can't remember the 5th one. And then pulled the quotes from the candidates and did them anonymously and had them rank them 1 through 5 and make 2 matrices and multiply them. I mean, it's just like the coolest thing. And I loved watching them. My students I kind of like let them loose today to get work on it. She did a little bit more reading through the statements with them, which they really loved. And we're going to come back together and talk about it. I have a Google form that pulled in all their data so we can kind of look and talk about it sort of anonymously, but they were really excited. They were like, really, we're going to do something with a different subject. I was like, yeah, let's do it. So some of them are 18. Most of them were just interested to do something that was math, but still pulled in that 21st century or real world modeling. So I'm really excited about it. And I also wanted to carry over with the previous teacher. I think the chat box is actually giving a voice to some of my quieter students that might not talk in the classroom, I'm having awesome conversations, not with all of them, but with some of them that are really interjecting and, being a part of the class in an anonymous way, like where you can say, hey, that was such a great comment. Let me, say that to the class, and really giving them a voice has been so cool. Um, a good thing to come out of this.
Yes, absolutely. I am a big fan of the chat box. I am also someone who, I like to think about the things I'm saying before I talk them. And so what usually ends up happening then is I either pause for a long time because I'm processing and thinking, and then we've moved on to another question by the time I'm ready, or I get to write in the chat box and kind of edit through there, and then put that up. So again, there's a lot of great ways of using the chat box, but thanks for mentioning how your students get voice. All right, folks, this is successes and celebrations. This is so important. I do this at the beginning of every PD. Also, whenever I work with kids, no matter the age. The nice thing about it is every single person gets to have a voice here. They can start writing back and forth to each other. Sometimes you'll see little comments like, I'll put it on slide 3, like, what was that website again? And the kids will start to kind of write back and forth to each other, put little hearts on things. And it's such a simple way to give voice to everybody and start your class. When you've got this community, they're ready to chat with each other, work with each other, and enjoy productive struggle together. If you join me on slide 5, I have our norms for success here. The first one is to put away all distractions. This session is not passive, and you're not going to sit back and watch. You're going to click, move, talk, and type the whole time. We are recording, so just be aware of your background noise. If you have questions, and I hope you do, you're going to post those questions on the very last slide. It's called the virtual parking lot. What it does is it gives me the opportunity to address questions throughout the session where they fit just right. But if I don't get them, I can pledge to meet these by the end of the session, make sure I give you the attention. It also lets me answer them during any downtime I might have. Your words matter. So when we talk about children and learning, we're going to use asset and positive language. If you make a mistake, no big deal. The best thing about technology is there's an undo button. So you can hit Control Z. The other thing you can do is if somebody else makes a mistake, be the Control Z superhero and calmly just remind them they can hit Control Z. For safety, make sure you're not driving. And profile pictures or cameras, either are welcome today. I'm going to turn off my camera because one thing I like to model is how we can still engage in conversation and have community even without the camera on. So at this point, I'm going to sign off the camera, but I will still be here face to face with you all over the audio. Our agenda is on slide 6. We're going to start off by being a learner. You get to do the math and do the discussions. And you don't need to pretend like you're a kid while doing it. Bring all the knowledge base that you have and include it in your solutions. After we had the chance to try it out and be a learner, then we're going to put on our teaching hat. And we're going to talk about opportunities and questions and answers about teaching online. Slide 7 shows 8 really important mathematical practices. These are the ones from NCTM in the Principles to Action book. It is so important that we model these and have these in our lessons regularly for students. You will see all 8 of these in the forefront of today's lesson. And then if you come on down to slide 8, let's get our mindsets ready for a great collaborative time together. As I read this out loud, read it to yourself. And if this is something that you pledge personally to do today, you can show us by typing your name in the Zoom chat box. I, Teresa, promise to try my best. I will make sense of patterns and numbers. I will use manipulatives and drawings. I will make mistakes. I will ask questions. I will listen to other ideas. I will stay engaged by always trying to find another solution or representation. I am a problem solver. I make the world a better place. If you would like to make that pledge today, you can put your name in the chat box over in Zoom. Look at all the problem solvers we have today. We are ready to dive in. Our task is on slide 9. This comes out of the Virginia Department of Education's Rich Task Bank. And I think I changed the title, folks. I think it's supposed to be parking spaces. Kristen or Tina, if you want to change that for me, feel free. I have a motorcycle myself, so I was thinking about that. On slide 9, our task says all 20 spaces in my favorite parking lot are filled by vehicles. Some are occupied by two-wheeled motorcycles and others by cars. Each space has only one vehicle occupying it. To calm myself, I counted wheels, and there were exactly 66. How many cars and how many motorcycles have parked in my lot? That's our task. I have provided a few resources for you all on slide 10. These are suggestions. They're things that I think will work quite well for this problem, but you're welcome to use anything you like, including Desmos. When you're making your slides, if you need more representations, you can also check that out. Below that are the different group slides, and momentarily you'll be placed in a group. So you'll find your slide to go on, move in that room, and fill it up with as many representations as possible. All right, I have our breakout rooms ready. You'll get a message in Zoom inviting you to that room. You can head down to that slide, turn on your mics, and say hello to your new friends. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to launch us into a mathematics discussion. And the steps I'm using are on slide 20. This is the 5 practices for orchestrating mathematics discussions. And what it requires is before I even give the problem to you all or students, that I anticipate many different solutions, strategies, representations, the technology involved, both the mathematics behind the technology and the techie help that might be needed during the problem solving time. Then I was in the monitoring stage. You all were in breakout rooms, and I was jumping in and out of the rooms, listening, guiding you all with very purposeful questions, and sometimes just checking in and seeing what was going on. The next part was selecting and sequencing, and I did that a little bit during the session as I'm monitoring. And also, I like to move myself in the main room where it's nice and quiet for the last minute or two, just so I can get my head together and my thought process together as I think about the connection stage. And that is where I take all those different strategies and try to connect them together.
Teresa, can
yeah.
I interrupt you real quick? Do you mind sharing your screen since we're recording?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And so if you join me on slide 21, these are very purposefully sequenced and some questions that are going to go along with it. Throughout this discussion, everyone can have a voice. Your voice could be using the microphone, but as mentioned earlier in successes and celebrations, please also use the chat box, and I'll ask you occasionally with some prompts for that. But let's start off with this first representation. And many of these have evolved into further representations, but I took them in the moment as it was happening. So if you were the author of this green representation, can you tell us what your thinking was and where you were planning to go next or where you did go next?
Yeah, so that was actually me, Teresa. I decided to use the 10 frames, thinking they would be a good tool considering we have 20 spaces. So I used the red as the cars and the yellow as the motorcycles, and I just kind of started playing around and thinking to myself, well, if all 20 spots had cars, how many wheels would there be? And I realized there would be 80 wheels, so that's too many. So obviously there's going to be some motorcycles. And then I thought, well, let me see what would it be if it was half and half. So I figured out that 10 spots with 4 wheels would be the 40, and then 10 spots with 2 wheels for the motorcycles would be the 20, which would be 60 wheels, which is not enough wheels. And then I just started changing the reds. I'm sorry, changing the yellows to reds. And I actually literally was just counting them until it worked out to 66.
And Kristen, the nice thing about this representation is the accessibility that you just described there.
Mhm.
So without even writing equations, without using variables or figuring out what a system is, you were able to access this problem and give you equal opportunity to talk about it in the whole class discussion. So now that we have access, let's start to relate it to a couple other things that we're seeing. Another group was mid table typing in here, and it was really neat because all 3 people were typing at the same time. If this group could explain their strategy and where they were going at this point.
So we were looking at this. We started with the 10 frame because that's when Liz said, she's like, it's 20 spots, so it'd be perfect for us to use the 10 frames. But then someone else said, hey, the table would be easier to do, to find out, like if you had 10 cars, you know, how many wheels would that be? And then if it was 20, and then put like a total column on the end. So we were all kind of putting in our own spots of what happened at, what happened at 10 cars, it was 40. So like we were all able to get the 40 to 44 and then the 48. And then someone else was thinking about with the motorcycles, if it was 10 motorcycles, what number we would be at. So we did that. And then we were all kind of like came to the thing of, oh, here's where they could see where the ordered pairs would be. So we were writing down like, okay, 10 cars, comma, 10 motorcycles.
Neat. And if you would like to see that completed table, they had worked on it on slide 15, and I'll pull it in now. But I also wanted to show off the power of the ability to grab something while it's in its rough draft before it's finished and have a conversation. You might even have students fill in the rest of the table. So if you haven't had a chance to speak yet, have your voice seen on the slide and add to the table. See what else needs to go in these empty spots. Alrighty. On slide 22, could this group just describe what were the tools that you use? I didn't recognize this virtual manipulative. Can you tell us a little bit about how you manipulated the tech to work for you?
Sure. This was my group, and it's literally just inserting a table into the slide and then filling in each box in the table with at the top, there's like a paint bucket with a red bar underneath it. That's where you can fill in, that's where you can fill in the box itself. So we also made a key, and when I made the key, I actually just inserted the shapes or a rectangle using the shapes, which is next to like to the left from that paint bucket. So there's like a circle and then a square behind it. That's where you can insert shapes. It's the same place where she just inserted an arrow. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So using tables was very versatile. And one thing that it does is it allows the whole class to engage right now. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and click in any cell that's there. So everyone take your mouse, move into a cell of this table, click it. I can see about 4 people are there. Once you see a cursor there, that one's taken. All right, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to type what your cell represents. Take a minute to think, and I'll let you know when to begin typing. What does the cell you're in represent? Go ahead and start typing. So what I'm doing right now is I'm making sure that they are thinking flexibly in this area. I can get a quick idea of where my class is at the moment. So tables are super duper powerful. And I can even ask someone, why did you put a 4 here? And someone else, why they put a car there. And so both that number 4 and the word car means the same thing. Awesome. All right, group. Coming on down to slide 23. I think this is where many people started to go. And I wanted, first of all, to talk about the table. What does the table represent? And why is that important when it comes to graphing? So go ahead and type in the chat box there. Why is making this table important to graphing? If you prefer to speak, you're more than welcome to use the mic. And so the reason I ask this question is I ask a lot of Algebra 1 students, like, what unit are you in? And they'll say, like, oh, we're making tables. Oh, okay. Well, are you doing anything else? And they're like, no, we're doing tables right now. And I'm thinking, does that connect with a graph? And so we have this kind of hurdle that, yes, there is time when we want to focus on tables, on graphs, on equations, on visual models. But in the end, we want the students to see them all related to one another, which is why a lot of the great software shows tables and graphs together these days. But now let's talk about important points. If you would like to tell us what an important point means, double click in one of those arrows and tell us what it is. And we're going to avoid terms like intercept, but instead use terms like cars or wheels or parking lots or spaces. What do each of those arrows mean? And they're typable arrows, so you just double click it and you can start typing in. And oops, one of them is upside down. Let me see. There you go, my orange arrow person. I'd given you an upside down one. There you go. Now it's right side up. So the person who wrote in the blue arrow, how do you know that there were 66 wheels right there? Other than it being really cool because there's a dot, like how did you know that?
It would be the sum. So hopefully you were able to see the sum, right?
Cool. So the sum of all the wheels is right there. There's some other great things going on. If we can get 4 other people, I'd love to know what those other important areas are in terms of wheels, spots, motorcycles, cars, parking lots. I see we've got the gray one. Oh, so this is perfect. This is what we're getting. So right now I have you all in as anonymous, which allows us to make mistakes and move on with it. But right now we have a blue and a gray. We're talking about motorcycles, cars, spaces, parking lots. Do we know what these intercepts actually mean in relation to the problem?
No.
Hmm. All right, let's think about that for a minute. We're going to come back up there.
So it's good to start with looking at what the line represents first, I guess, when you're like trying to demonstrate it to the students. Like, okay, so
Mhm.
which line is this? And so these are the lines. This is the line that we had that talked about cars, or this was the line that talked about spaces we had, and this was the line that talked about how many wheels there were. So I don't remember which one line was the which line was which, but one of the lines talks about, I can't see the numbers. Yeah, I couldn't either, but I had to go back to the other graph. One of them talked about the number of spaces there was, which was 20, and then the other one was talked about the number of wheels, that the total amount of wheels. And so then
Yeah.
where they stop at is like where I guess we're looking at.
That is some really neat ways of thinking about it. So we have a hypothesis that the blue line is cars, the red line is motorcycles, even if we don't have any numbers. Is there a way we can validate if blue line is cars and red line is motorcycles?
I'm looking at the slope.
Looking at the slope, how is that useful? This is a great thing to look at.
So if you're looking at just the ratio, you get a 4:2. I'm just reaching on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're doing a fabulous job. We should look at slope. That's a great teller. What does the slope mean?
So it's usually a rate of change if you're a physics person like me. So it's a relationship.
Cool. And Liz, you mentioned this 4/1 and 2/1. What does that mean to you?
I was just thinking about the only thing we really know is that the cars have 4 wheels and the motorcycles have 2. So if I ask my students to create slope from those 2 values, since they're whole numbers, they'd have to be stacked over 1. And I was really disturbed by not being able to see any of the numbers because of the arrows, but I didn't even think about slope. Do you know what I mean? Like I was obsessing over the
Mhm.
fact that I couldn't count because I couldn't see around the arrows. Like at one point I almost moved an arrow and I realized that that wasn't, it's a community thing. So I didn't want to do that. But yeah, the slope that's the best I can think of though, is how I would see it as a student, without being able to really count the boxes properly. Cause I can't tell how far each box is. Like, is it 10? Is it 20? Like, I really can't be sure.
Yes. So by looking at the slope, now we're not just saying like mx. There's something to the slope, and that's going to lead us in perfectly to slide 24. We have a couple of equations here, and we have a different graph here. And this time, you're not seeing the same numbers down there at the that's not the x-intercept, so we can't quite look at that one, but we can see these different zones. And when I say zone, I'm thinking about things that are important to talk about in graphing. So let's start out by talking about the purple zone. What type of answers are here? If I plotted a point here, what type of answer does that explain? Feel free to put your thinking in the chat box. What do you think that point represents? And at this time, feel free to put in the chat box what color you're talking about and what do all the points in that section mean? What about if the point was over in red? What does that mean? I think we're all pretty comfortable about what it means when the point is right there at that intersection. What about the other spots? Chelsea, you mentioned that the orange has no solutions. I'm trying to think of a point that would be here in the orange. I'm going to move up so I can see my numbers. So we might have the point 716. What does that mean to you?
So it depends on the axes, but either way, it would likely mean that we would have too many cars or a combination of too many cars and motorcycles so that there isn't enough space for them in the parking lot. So basically.
Cool. So the orange represents like we're not going to be able to have space for all these cars. Cool. Who's got an explanation for the green? If you think you understand what the green is representing, let us know. Mary, you mentioned the purple. How do you know that this means wouldn't fill up the lot?
Well, any point in there, any combination of points would be less than 20. So like 1,18 or something like that would only add up to 19. So, and there's only 20 spots.
Yeah. All right, folks, what do you think about that red and that green area? What do those represent? Does that mean we have too many spots, too few spots, too many cars, too few cars, too many motorcycles? What's going on in those areas?
Yeah.
So at this point, I would pause. I can see here our thinking that's going on, and I like to leave the students with enough information that they can start to guess what the green and red are, but maybe they might need just a little bit more time to think about it. And so that day might be the end of our synchronous class. Our next day might be asynchronous, it might be homework. But at that point, I'd say, hey, what do all these different things mean? What do the intercepts mean? What does the intersection mean? And what do all the other areas mean in terms of it? We would come back the next day and we would have that big reveal because systems of equations and these graphs can tell us so much more than that little tiny point at the intersection. And being able to have that full understanding of the graph, connecting it to the other formulas or the other representations lets us know what happens when one car pulls out of the parking lot. What happens when three go in and they're all fighting for that space? Like, so we can move flexibly on this coordinate plane. I'm going to leave that challenge to you all. And on slide 25, I've got a couple questions that I was hoping to ask you all today and get to within our goal. But I do want to give us a 5-minute working break here. And if you join me on slide 26, let's start talking with our teacher hat. For the next 5 minutes, you're going to look at these two links. They go to the Virginia Department of Education, the Rich Task Bank, and also this particular task, and see what all is in there. If it's new to you, really browse through with detail. If this is familiar for you, go back and see if you can find a really special gem, something that you might not have paid as much attention to before, and see what great things are out there. We're going to return at 8:09 and talk a little bit more about what we've done today. All right, folks, welcome back. I hope that you found these links very useful. The Virginia Department of Education has done a phenomenal job of thinking about every aspect of these rich tasks. Even the questions you can ask during the discussions, during the small groups, there is so much jam-packed there. Alrighty, on slide 27, 28, or 29, feel free to find a space here for your words. You're going to type in what opportunities were available because of the technology. As you write these, I'm going to highlight a couple of them just to give you a heads up that I'd love for you to elaborate. So on slide 27, tell us about how you could have as many groups. How did you experience this today? And what's your thoughts for classroom use?
So once you get more than a couple groups going in a classroom, the noise level goes up. It's a little bit harder to manage the groups. They get distracted. But with the breakout groups, you can have groups of 2 if you want to, which would be maybe 10, 12 groups going on, which would be really impractical in a classroom just because of the space and noise. A lot of times that's a challenge, but in the breakout groups, it's quiet. And you can jump in there, maybe don't feel as much pressure from what other groups are doing. So sometimes space is no longer a constraint in the virtual environment.
Absolutely. I love it for that reason. I can always head to the main room when I need a quiet moment to myself to organize my thoughts. Yeah. All right. How about slide 28 in the green highlight? How were you, how was being able to see other people's work made this problem better for you?
So I think it's nice that, usually within a group, you'll tend to get on like one track of thinking. And then after, you've got kind of come to the end of that thinking, if you're looking for other ideas, it's nice to be able to scan the work of other people and then, discuss that with your group, or it might lead to other thoughts. So I like that feature.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Somebody mentioned that the teacher was able to easily grab samples of work to showcase at the end. Why is this useful to do?
That was me again. I think it's nice, in the classroom, the teacher has to kind of walk around, and just in the time you spend walking around, you are, not looking at other work. And on something like this, it's so easy to click through the work and just take a screenshot and just like you did, add it to the end, so that everything's kind of on the computer. So it's just really easy to project for everyone to see, as opposed to kids are doing stuff on paper in the classroom. You might have to like put it up on the smart board and represent it again. And so it's just a little bit more time efficient this way.
Yeah. Indeed, you'll save a lot of time. There is a learning curve of learning how to use this, but once that's down, it's a big time saver. Another one that is near and dear to my heart is on slide 27 in blue. Um, I mentioned before, I'm someone who likes to think about my answers before I say them out loud. And I hope today that you've seen different ways that I've allowed you to have a voice without being put on the spot. So if this person would like to share at all, I invite you to, how did you experience that today? What were some of the things that happened that made you feel this way?
Well, I loved how you anonymized us. I loved how you said the word. Sorry, it's my family. I loved
Oh,
how you
don't be
said the
sorry.
word.
That's why we got into this business.
Oh, I love how you said the word. I'm going to take a pause right here. So you didn't say anyone was right. You didn't say anyone was wrong. You just said, I'm going to take a pause right here. And because we were able to voice it in the chat and we were able to put it on the Google slide, it wasn't as if, okay, this person, you were wrong, this person was correct. You said, I'm going to showcase some things. You didn't take the finished work as well. Like you took the work that was in progress. So even if that person wasn't on the right track, or if they didn't get the right answer at the end, they were on the right track, but you kind of sampled that. So I like that technology of you being able to snap it. It was, what you call it, the draft thinking. What did you call it? Like they weren't finished or
Oh,
undone.
Rough Draft Thinking, Mandy Jensen's new book. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that you were able to take that part, and so now even if I didn't get the correct answer, at least my thinking was good, and you commended me for that, and you were like, if the person would like to say something or not say something, it's your choice.
Absolutely. And the fun thing is when a student, let's say they made a misconception or a mistake in their early work, and you were able to capture that, and then they started going down a different route, and all of a sudden they're having big aha moments. You can even, chat with that group, with that student, and say, hey, I got it early on. Would you like to show the class what to do if they were thinking this way? And kids love that. They love showing, like, hey, here's the way of not doing it. Here's how you can do it, and they're so just good at it. Um, awesome. All right, let's talk about how to do this in your classroom. Slide 30 is a formula that has been out for a while about how to assess technology in your classroom. It's called the SAMR model. I've used the SAMR model in a slightly different way, but kept the heart of it the same on slide 31. And this is what I do whenever I am thinking about putting a rich task in an online space. Um, I think about, first of all, how do we do the exact same thing online? And so one way of doing that is, seeing the student's notebook. I'm going to go to Insert, why can't I say it? Image, Camera. I'm going to use my camera. You can now see my notebook. I'm going to snip that picture and insert it. So real quickly, I can see my students' notebooks and what they're thinking and doing. They can put it on that public space. If you were curious of how to do that, I'm going to put a screen capture of the clicks that I did. So that's over there if you need to take a peek at either of those. But things like take. So here the tech isn't doing much different. It's just giving you a space to see it. The next part, I think about what are cool tips and tricks that are going to make my life more efficient. Things like copy, pasting, and duplicating. As I mentioned before, we had that incomplete table that a group worked on, and I was able to take a snapshot of it before it was finished. That's not something I would have been able to do in the face-to-face class, or at least it would take me longer to develop it. So this is all about efficiency. And then the next question I ask is, could this task be better online? And what defines better? And so in this case, I often look at connecting representations. And what I mean by that is on slide 23, we're connecting somebody's table with somebody else's graph and asking about where these points lie. On 21, we're connecting the dots over with the table and the connection between their same processes and how the process of the dots translates into a more abstract notation of the table. And so those ones I can do a little bit online. Also on slide 23, having anybody type in the arrows or make predictions in the arrows. Those are all things that are enhanced with online. And we've come to the part of the presentation where I like to ask you all, what is your biggest concern about teaching online? Because while I don't have a whole bank of solutions, I have a lot of experience, and I can give you ideas that have worked for me, that have worked for other people, and give you some other perspectives to think about um, as we kind of look into this new zone. And as you are typing those, I have a bit of downtime, so I'm going to write in the virtual parking lot. In terms of ways for kids to do and show work, sometimes the low tech is just as powerful as the high tech. So, just like I showed you a picture of my notebook, I'm not a big fan of a lot of math type software that's out there. So if I'm solving a multi-step equation with exponents and all kinds of stuff, I'm probably going to do it in my notebook and take a picture, snap it up there, and then relate each of those steps to a diagram. So those are some different ways that I have them show work, but I start with the basics with the notebook. And once they have the hang of that, they can start moving things digitally. Someone wrote, not seeing when they have trouble with a concept. And so one thing that I've done is have the different groups and, make sure that when you assign groups that they each have a job in it. And a way of kind of differentiating that from elementary school when you each had a job there is in the secondary, I usually use terms like the mayor, make sure that everyone's voice is heard. Sometimes I give that to the person who might be most talkative so that they have that extra reminder to listen out for others. Um, and the other part is just seeing their work on the slide. Um, you can, after this activity, I might give them a quick check that looks a lot like slide 24, and they can fill it out independently after the discussion and just see where they are on it, see if they are able to identify different zones and talk about inequalities in that sense. In terms of student engagement, what I have found to be the best seller for student engagement is discussing a variety of representations. So if we were to only showcase on slide 24 the equations there, if we're only going to showcase the abstract and if we only actually care about the answer, then students are going to be less engaged. They're going to just try and get the answer and be done. The problem solving oath that you all pledged earlier asked you to keep making representations. And after a few classes and seeing that, I'm going to pick the ones that are very visual and connect to the abstract. Then I'm going to realize, like, oh, that's what my teacher wants, not just the right answer. And so that increases the engagement. It's been one of the biggest tellers for me. The person who said that, that the technology and pedagogy is great, but I need more time for practice. Thanks for putting that there. I think a lot of people are feeling that. And yeah, it's not fair. I had 10 years to slowly dip my toe into the swimming pool and learn to swim, and you all cannonballed off the deep end. So, yes, you should have more time to practice. And your students need more time to practice also. So give yourself that grace and that time to say, I'm going to try this new thing. I'm going to try this new thing. And as often as possible, ask your students, is there a better way I could represent this? Does anyone know the tech? And anyone can put together a YouTube video for me about how to do this part. And they love doing stuff like that. Um, to address the one that says losing kids in links and directions, there's a couple things that I do very purposefully to make sure that I have everyone's attention before giving directions. Slide 8, I wanted everyone's attention before we got to slide 9, before we launched the task. And since I can't see all of you all, I have things like a problem-solving oath or maybe some quick check-in. And then I ask you to respond in the chat box. When I can see that I have 22 people responding in the chat box and my class is 25, I can identify like which kiddos didn't respond. Maybe I pay special attention to them in the next session when they move there. So that's one way that I can do that. And being consistent where your links are. So slide 10, I have lots of virtual manipulatives that I use. I can give you guys a link to the bank. And virtual manipulatives depend on the task. So you can see here, let me give you a link. It's always very predictable to my students where to go for virtual manipulatives. This one was all about making tree diagrams. So I have Desmos, Google Sheets, Graphs, Diagram App, and this Family Tree Maker. Other ones deal with proportions. So there's different applets for them to use. And I've gotten very consistent about putting the links right there, giving a picture, describing what it is. And that makes it a lot easier for my students to know where to go. I'll continue to answer questions. I do want to get to the couple in the virtual parking lot. In terms of being anonymous, that is the way that you share. I've got a little video here that shows you how to share Google Slides 7 ways. So check that out. That'll let you know why you're anonymous and all that good stuff. The idea of kids will not write anything, fear of being asked to explain. There's a couple things that I do here, and I recognize the unique age level of the students that you work with. And in my classes, bright green has a very important a signal for my students. If they change their text box to bright green at any time, it's basically the same as raising a hand like, oh yeah, I'm ready to share this. If I want to call on them, oftentimes I change the outline to bright green as just a little notification. Hey, I'm going to be calling on you at some point. Some of my students will very purposefully turn off that little outline. It doesn't mean I will or will not call on them, but it does give me a signal that maybe they're not ready yet. So I do kind of little signals like that also. And let me point to the frequently asked questions on slide 39. If you're new to a lot of these slides, I've got a lot of great frequently asked questions, like how do I lock a slide? How do my students move between the slides in Google Meet or Zoom? How does it look like if my student's on an iPad, phone, or tablet? And on slide 35, I like to give my students a scavenger hunt whenever I am using Google Slides to see what they know before I assume they don't know how to do it. So here, I've been very explicit about what I want them to do, add a picture of you, but then I put in parentheses, yay, you can immediately upload a selfie. I want to know if you can do that because that means you can upload your math work. So those are some of the technology pre-assessment tools that I use. Kristen, I know we are running out of time here. If you, gosh, we are always on the same wavelength. If you want to interject there about the certificate, and then I'll take some more of these afterwards.
Yes, I am currently uploading the certificate of attendance into the chat box. So you should be able to click on it and download it to your computer as a PDF document. If you have difficulty doing that, it's not a big deal. You can email me and I will email it to you.
Thanks, Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Tina, did you have? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, Teresa. You have shared so many great things, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I know you're going to stay and look at some other things with everybody, but thank you so much.
Yes, it was wonderful as usual. Lots of great stuff.
Absolutely. There was one other one on here I really wanted to address while people are still on. But in terms of students hiding, I'm a hider. That's in my nature. I'm not one to be on the camera front and center talking a lot. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not engaged. It just means that I want to engage a different way. Now, I'm only talking about me. Your students might have different things, but that's a little bit of my background. I love to write in the chat box. I love to write on slides. That's my favorite way of having my voice heard. And the more options I'm given for this, the more I'm going to take it. The more that you say, I'm going to check off, make sure everyone's voice is heard. You can use the mic or you can use the chat box, and making sure they know that there's accountability there. But sometimes that is just as much as you might consider yourself an introvert or extrovert, and sometimes they're hiding. That's truth to it. So finding other ways that they have to interact every few minutes. All right, now everyone put a post-it note here, move your star here, type this here. It can be really useful to continue to engage them that way.
Yeah, it's kind of the same as when you think about it as a face-to-face classroom. I mean, you might be able to physically see your kids, but you don't know if they're actually engaged and attending. So I think it's the same thing. You need to be asking them to do different things to engage, not just sit there and listen.
Yeah, Kristen, what you're talking about, I am a pro at being in a face-to-face classroom, looking like I'm paying attention, even nodding, and really I'm planning out like what is the next water balloon going to be between me and my kids, and who's going to have the squirt guns and who's going to like I'm a pro at that. I've clearly been through plenty of meetings. So yeah, it's all about accountability and engagement. All right, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. If I see another one in here, I know I'm trying to address so many of these, and there's a lot, but I think I got to most of them. All right, folks, have a wonderful evening and have a great time teaching online.